Dr. Edwin Williams, thank you so much for joining. You're a huge mentor to me and our whole community. Thank you for being here. This is a business podcast. Some of the folks listening may not know who you are. So, for those who aren't familiar, maybe give us about a minute of your background and everything you've built over the last, dare I say, 3 decades.
Yeah, so I'm a double board certified facial plastic surgeon. I went into practice in 1992 after fellowship, and always had somewhat of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I kept adding what I call profit centers or profitless centers. But what that really means is I have made every mistake out there, probably that everyone has. We have a 23,500 square foot facility that we finally, after 33 years, occupy the entire facility. Number of doctors, a medical spa, an ambulatory surgery center, and a couple different offices as well. And that's it. I've been very involved with the AFPRS for years. My passion, if there's such a thing, because I think that word is used too liberally these days. People talk about being passionate about facelifts. I don't know if that's even possible. I love doing facelifts, but I always have been very passionate about mentoring and teaching the next generation. So that is something I can truly say is something I'm kind of passionate about. And that's why, I applaud you for doing this. And it's I'm not going to say no. And by the way, I learn something every single time I do something. So that's why I do this. And we have to help each other. So that's it. That's me in a nutshell. I have a family. I got 4 kids and a wife. Our youngest is in college. So we're actually glad we like each other still. And we just got back from Italy, spending about 10 days together. And that was pretty cool. In Tuscany, and eating and a lot of food and drinking a lot of wine. So
That sounds incredible. And yes, to like each other after that many years is a feat for sure.
yeah,
You,
really, especially in this world.
you mentioned that you've made every mistake in the book.
Yeah.
What's one of the biggest obstacles you didn't anticipate, and how did you work to overcome it?
Well, probably one of the biggest obstacles that I um didn't anticipate was being naive. We finish our training. There's just tons of camaraderie. We all help each other. We're a team. And then, I went to a town where, I was the first facial plastic surgeon. It was an 8-person plastic surgery group. And so, it's hard to find that people don't like you, and for no reason other than you're different and that you are a threat. And then there's other people that are, I like otolaryngologists. I thought they would be my allies, and they are now. I know them all. We're all friends, but back then, there was jealousy. They're thinking that, oh yeah, he says he's going to do facial plastics, but he's going to be doing our sinus stuff. And then I put this building in, and the comments I got, I don't know. So, and you have to grow some thick skin early on. I don't think you should let it ruin your good nature, but there's some of the lessons I learned early on. Others are, boy, and it's not easy, but you can't be too nice. You just can't be too nice. You're too nice, you get the shitty anesthesia shittiest anesthesia person. They start your cases late, and and I think, I'm saying this because I got 3 girls. I think it's tough as a woman too, because if you're a little bit of a hard ass, you're a bitch. So and I think, no, I
Talk more,
think it.
talk more
I think,
about that. Like, how do you balance being too nice? Because it's something that I very much struggle with, both with vendors, with reps, with, your team that's patient facing.
um,
How have you changed your approach to things through the years, and where do you kind of sit now?
yeah, no, really, a really good question, because I don't think you should stop being nice. I think that I still am a very kind person. But um, I, I did a personality profile testing years ago, and I think you can be a little different. I'm a different person at work. Um, I got my game face on. Um, I'm very calculated now. I make sure I spend time with our team. I make sure that I'm not just focusing on my work when I'm at work. So I realized the importance of being a good leader. That was the other thing. I think in the early days, I was so focused on, I was very industrious. And so for focusing getting my work done, that I didn't slow down enough to realize the most important thing to everyone else is, I'm happy if, if we hit certain numbers and I've done a great job and whatever, but building a team and the rah-rah, if you want to call it, it's really important to people. Didn't mean I wasn't nice. It just meant I, um, you know, so how do you do that? I think you have to have certain, I hate this because it sounds so cliched, but certain boundaries and rules at work that may be different than your boundaries and rules at home. And I, I don't socialize with people that I work with. In my next life, I'll be friends with them. And that does not mean that um, I'm not kind to them. I don't know their families. I just think that I made a few of those, and I made a number of those mistakes. And I've seen other colleagues of ours make those mistakes, not having real solid boundaries around your work team and your home team, or
Very
your home. Your home and your people, your family are your people, and um, yeah, I have one daughter's an ophthalmologist. She's worked with us a bit, and another one who's now working with us, and it's interesting because she sees me as a very different person at work. And she said to me once, oh, probably 5 years ago, she's like, Dad, honestly, I didn't even like, I knew what you did, but like, I really didn't really know like what you've been up to all these years. You take off in the morning because I try to keep them separate. And I think that's important. And it doesn't mean it's really hard to be impartial to everyone when you're friendly with, when you're socializing with, your manager. And these are some of the biggest mistakes I made early on.
How long did it take you to see those as mistakes? Was there
About
like some critical
10,
incident that that
10, 10 years. Yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, I'll give you one example. I had a patient concierge, patient PCC that was with us for 23, 24 years. She was my longest standing person on the team, other than Susan Sullivan, who's been with me now 28 years. But, um, Marianne got to be friendly. My wife actually hired her, and she kind of grew into practice, and she was pretty influential person because she was one of our patient concierge, and back in the day I only had one. So, it was Marianne, and we do Thanksgiving with her. Marianne had a little side business. She used to cut hair. So I'm an efficiency freak, right? So once a month I say, hey, Marianne, do you mind, bringing, or I text her, you mind bringing in your stuff? And she cut my, like, I know I had 15, 20 minutes somewhere during the day, and or a day I'd finish, I'd come up, she'd cut my hair. I'd give her $20 or something, just like, kind of thank you. Um, but Marianne, we had a personal relationship, and because we'd done Thanksgiving together and we'd spent some time together, she got to be friendly with my wife, and then she's cutting my hair. So, she had my ear in a way that other people didn't, and it created some problems. And that's a little example, but I can go on and on and on. And I think that's, I'll tell you, I had an ophthalmologist once. You were talking about health insurance, and he was talking about one plan versus another. And he was, oh, Ed, well, no, that's really good for your staff. You don't want that for your family. That's not what I'm talking about. That to me is, patronizing. And, we're all at the same level. We're a team. You'll never hear me call my team. You'll never hear me refer to them as my staff. I find that's, it's demeaning. And I hear it all the time. People always refer to their people as their staff. And in fact, I have some of my managers who'll make a reference to their staff, and I'm like, oh no, no, we're a team, So it, I find it offensive when people, say, well, I don't socialize because, I'm different social circles. No, I, there's some of them I would love to socialize with. I just think it's hard for me to be effective and be impartial when when we're hanging out together. That's all. Does that mean there is a difference, right?
For sure. Yeah, definitely a difference. Um, and something that's kind of very much in the gray zone a lot of days, especially when you're in the OR all day with the same three people and you really want to chat about stuff, get to know them, get to know their family, all that. But
Problem with that though. They know a lot of my personal life. I know a lot of their personal life, and I think that's important that we all know each other. I just, you know, social hanging with it just that's where I draw the line. I mean, I just, Susan Sullivan and I have been together for, like I said, 28, 29 years, and rarely will you ever see us in the same vehicle together. I don't ever want rumors. I don't want, it just, it screws up the dynamics in my experience.
you are unique in that you're one of the very successful surgeons who's brought on other surgeons into your practice and have really grown a huge team. Talk a little bit about what has led to your success in attracting and retaining other surgeons.
Yeah. Um, I made some mistakes, by the way. I had a couple failures. One was a plastic surgeon. I was too nice. I'll be honest, I was too nice to him. And the other was kind of by default, long story. But so what is what has been our success? For me, I have very accurate legal and accounting. That to me is paramount, and that's where you got to start. Because and when you are bringing someone on, you have to be you have to live by the same rules. You can't have more, if you're going to bring someone on and you're going to, because I mean, I could talk forever about equity. What's equity, right? But if you're going to share equity, even if it's a 2% or an 8% or 12% or whatever the equity piece is, if you own stock in another company, everybody owns stock, gets the same voice or no voice. Now, if some one person owns a lot more equity than the other, then naturally they're going to have I just got to turn the volume on my laptop down so it's not pinging. There are equity based decisions. If you read Ray Dalio's book, he does a beautiful job. His book called Principles. But what I've really tried to do is to and day one, when you talk to someone about, you bring someone on, it's a salary based position and you can have a performance piece. The first thing I do, I believe that after 18 months, you know whether this person's you're going to be part of your team or not. So why make it a 2 or 3 year path to partnership? To me, that's just abuse. That's just using the junior person. And I've seen that. The other thing is everything's got to be laid out from the beginning. I can't tell you because I have a lot of people who ask me, can you give me some guidance? Can you give me some because I'm looking at this situation and invariably the ones that fall apart and probably 98% of them, right? Um, well, here's what it is, and when it gets time, we'll talk about what partnership looks like. I do just the opposite. I tell them it's exactly what it looks like. I live by the same rules. We have the same spending allowance. We're on a performance base. I don't take just so no one can ever question it. I don't take any additional for managing the practice. I have the largest piece of equity, so I'd be out of my mind to leave that up for chance. And by the way, is share value goes up. And by the way, I've had this not happen a number of times. And one of my partners just left to go to the West Coast a year ago. He and his wife, picked up and move, and his stock was worth 3 times what he paid for it, and he got very nice distributions all along the way. So it works if you do it correctly.
Mhm.
Uh, but that is the key to success. And then when the day that partnership is offered, okay, you have to have a valuation of, fair market, reasonable fair market valuation of what that equity is worth. I had one of my former fellows, I mentored him and gave him advice, and I told him where I was concerned about. And a few years later, go. Actually, I've had two recent fellows, and same exact situation. At the end of 2 years, well, when am I going to be partner? When am I going to be partner? And one of them in particular, he said he pushing and pushing and pushing, and the senior partner is like, well, okay. And he says, well, can you tell me how's that structured? And wrote it down the back of a napkin at dinner. Here's what it's worth. you know and to me, if you can't open your books, then and my by the way, my managers, my team, I was adamantly opposed. I was opposed to this as well. My key people, and managers, people in our key positions, they see the profit loss statements. um and if you talk to, and I had a real hard time with this in the beginning. I think a lot of us have a hard time with this, sharing our financials. But I have, you know, if they're paid and there's a benchmark for what, a CFO, someone just asked me the other day, and, how do you know what to pay people? Well, a CFO of a business that's a $3 million business, a $10 million business, a $15 million, there's benchmarks out there.
Mhm.
And so, if they're paid better than the benchmark for your geographic, they're doing well. I have no problem them seeing what I get paid, because I'm on a performance model. I don't have a base salary. So, but I
Do you
think
take
the team.
that approach for your whole team, like your nurses and
No,
people that
no,
aren't necessarily in higher
no.
level?
Yeah. So depending on what state you're in, so that's only for the MDs. Depending on which state you're um, in New York State, the Office of Medical Misconduct, you look up medical misconduct, is called revenue sharing with a non-physician. It's right there, black and white. And I don't care, so how do you get around that? And
Sorry, not revenue sharing, just their salary.
well, if you're a performance based model and it's a nurse, injector, that's revenue sharing.
Mm.
They're not licensed as a doctor. It's like you can't go, revenue. You couldn't work in a law firm and get a percentage of what they get. So, and office, look up misconduct under, the American College of Surgeons. It says the same thing. So our doctors are paid on a performance, and it's just a sliding scale, and it goes up a little bit as they make partner. But it's all well laid out and well thought out. And I think that's the key to doing it. And then fairness. And that's not easy. I've had four kids. They know how many, you have more pictures of Lydia in your study than me, and it's the same with doctors. And someone, I said once, what I do is like herding cats. Fortunately, I speak feline, because I am a surgeon, so I can relate to it. But boy, oh boy, it's hard to keep things fair. It really is. That's the hardest part of what I do, you know.
Do you have your surgeons sign non-competes when they come on with you?
I do. Yeah, I do. And I have no problem looking someone in the eye. I mean, listen, we're going to invest in you. We're going to for example, so one of the other important parts, I believe, of making it work is you got to give something up. You can't say, "Oh, I'm going to bring you on and give you all the shit that I don't want," right? I mean, so when Slaughter came on, I had a very robust soft tissue practice. Now I know you have just a cosmetic practice, but we do well with ours because we have 2 room. We can run 2 rooms. I mean, Slaughter did a pile of skin cancer today, and it isn't all just about making money, but it helps our surgery center. It helps him. It keeps our facility fees low, and we've locked up the area. It's also our reputation here. Is these guys are the good guys. So, I mean, I didn't have to give that to him because my fellows can do those cases, with me and my guidance. I can be doing something else. But I gave that up to him. We bought a we bought a hair practice. Now Slaughter's now starting to do a share of aging face and rhinoplasty, whatever. But one of the biggest mistakes that I see, well, there's a couple. One, uh, senior surgeons get greedy. I'm just saying it. Okay. Um, and two, their ego gets in the way. All of a sudden they see, the junior guys like booking, as many facelifts, and it bothers them. And what I did to prepare for that is I lived a pretty, I want to use the word frugal. I lived a pretty conservative existence. And that's why, if you read The Millionaire Next Door, the wealth of this country is in the hands of the small businessman. We all know CEOs that make multiple, 7, 8 figures, but the reality is most of the wealth. And the reason why is small business people don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So they live a conservative lifestyle. And why is this important? First of all, I don't want my kids to, I certainly have much more of a lifestyle now than I ever did. But back in my early years, we lived I didn't live a showy lifestyle. And my point though with that is that one day you wake up and you've got more than you'll ever need, and you can afford to give stuff away. Whereas if you've got a big lifestyle, and I just had this recently happen again. One of my former fellows calls me up and he's like, you know, he's telling me about all the extravagant things that his senior partner has, and yet, he wants to keep him right over here. Here, you stay over here, and the whole mushroom thing. And I think that's where there's a multitude of factors. One is being very forthright with your accounting and but again, let's talk about a non-compete. I mean, if I'm going to give you, we bought a hair transplant practice. Okay, we paid for that and bought it, took risk.
Mhm.
It's yours to run with. We're building a website with your name on it. There is a significant amount of damage if you just pick up and leave, especially if you pick up and leave and compete with us. So, I feel strongly. I know, without getting into politics, there's a big push to get away with non-competes because, and I, quite frankly, the government wants to do away with non-competes because a doctor can go across town and make more money, and the government gets more payroll tax, and that's the only reason they want it to do it. But the reality is, if it's structured correctly, and it's going to be, if they do get rid of it, it's going to be many years from now, because there are damages, and they can be, and if they're quantified, and they've had legal counsel, and they agree that those damages represent, our fair market value for the damages of leaving, I mean, a judge is not going to say, well, you can't work in this town. Your partner say, well, you can break this, but there's a damage to that, and you agree to that damage, and that's likely to be looked upon favorably. And the reality is, if that's a significant number, the other partner, associate, surgeon, whatever you have, who has equity, um, you know, do they really want to take that on? A court battle that can go on 2, 3 years and cost. I actually know, one of my former fellows ended up in a multiple 7-figure, court battle over, you know, litigation. It's easier to pick up and just go move a few states away. So, but yeah, the long answer to that is, the short answer is yes, but I do think if you're going to bring someone on and you're taking risk with them, you're building a team. I mean, you're bringing in nurses, you're hiring other people. And I'll tell you, one of the other lessons I learned early on too is that, actually I continue to learn it, but I tell this to our young, nobody, unless they have walked in your shoes, whatever that situation, can understand risk. Okay. They people, and this is one of the other things, I was too generous with my team, because, and doctors tend to be, listen, doctors tend to be giving people, right? We tend to be kind people. And we struggle, and we struggle, and we struggle. And now we're 38 years old, and we're having this degree of financial success. And we feel like we need to sometimes overly share. And I've made that mistake too. Because the problem, when you overcompensate people, you can't get rid of them. Well, you can, I mean, but it's really hard to get rid of them, because they start really holding them accountable, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm holding accountable, and then they start looking around and they can't duplicate what they have with you, so they stay put.
Mm.
And there's a real balancing act with, with that. So, yeah, I do feel non-competes are very fair, but getting back to the risk piece, people will never understand your risk ever, ever. And wait till you're 30 years out. They weren't there during the grind, the real grind. I mean, I know you're feeling it to some degree just because it's, and maybe you got thicker skin than I did, but I got to tell you, the I don't have any stress now. I mean, compared to back then, I had hassles and headaches and stuff, but financial stress, to me, is the worst stress out there.
Yeah, we're approaching 2 years, and I feel like I can finally breathe a little bit financially. But the first 2 years, I mean, I looked at my bank account every morning and
Oh yeah,
hustle
I
like
hear.
the book. I mean, take it from your book out of, yeah. And yeah, it's nerve-wracking because it's such a volatile, like you were just saying, the small business person doesn't know what's around the corner or what's going to happen today or tomorrow. And so always having that in the back of my mind that the phones could stop ringing, which I know that you've been through several recessions, it's terrifying.
It's very scary, I mean, 9/11. Who would ever predicted that, right? And 9/11 happens and my phone stops ringing. We're 2 hours from New York. People were walking around here in a daze for 2 months. So, I had a bad accident on a horse once, and that put me out for, I was had an X fix and fasciotomies and all that. I was out for 6 8 weeks, and anyway, the whole thing is there's the risk piece. And here's the other thing: as you start bringing people in, you want to be fair to them, but you also want to be fair to yourself. You can't be too generous on the equity piece because um no one will ever understand, 20 years from now will ever understand the amount of risk that you took. It's just
Mhm.
that it's been my experience. No matter how, you can tell the stories, but unless you've lived it, um it's just not the same. It really isn't. Worrying about where that, I remember like having, a dermatologist have two or three of them sending me cases, and then all of a sudden, like one stops. I'm like, what's going on? What did I do wrong?
Let me recall every case and lay awake in bed thinking about every patient. Yeah.
Yeah. You see someone, because I'm young, right? So I see someone for a skin cancer and a bilo flap kind of, I'm like looking to schedule them, and all of a sudden, like I say, they called and canceled. And I'm like, well, what happened there? It's like, well, they kind of were told you should go to someone else, I mean, that kind of stuff. And I mean, I'm sure, you have that now happen, with bigger cases like facelifts or something. And it's
Yes.
like, I remember Steve Daines when he first went out. He was like, he called me up once. He goes, wait, he goes, I'm like out of my mind. I had this woman booked, and then someone told her that I just didn't have enough experience, and I lost her.
Yeah.
And those things beat you up really bad. I don't now. If it happens, I'm like, good, get rid of them. I mean, good riddance. I don't need your headache. I don't need someone who's second guessing me. Goodbye. I don't. But in the early years, those things are really beat you up pretty bad. They did me anyway.
Yeah. And you're already questioning, that whole imposter syndrome or just
Uh,
insecurity in general. It's already very real. And then when someone does something like that, it tends to validate some of your deepest, darkest thoughts. I
yeah,
want
my
to,
I'll just say one day, my 25-year-old daughter said something about, whatever. And just like sometimes, like dealing with imposter, syndrome. And she was, I got to like deal with it, get over it or something. I'm like, or something, I forget. And I said, Riley, you never get over it. To me, like, it still blows my mind that people like respect me. So like, I'm like, what did I'm pulling this off. Like I'm somehow pulling this off. So just know that it's something you don't ever really get over. It's a really thing, and maybe that's what motivates us. Anyway, you had a question for me.
well, that's interesting because I feel like a couple of times I've gone home and told my husband, like, somehow this is all working, like
I'm making them all.
I somehow the business is actually working. And he's like, well, yeah, what'd you think? And I'm like, I don't know. It's surreal sometimes when you stand back and look at the forest. But I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about, you have a lot of patients that come and visit you from elsewhere. What things did you and your team do or do you do, and how have things morphed over the years in terms of when traveling surgical patients come in and stay with you guys? What are some little things that your team does to help them feel more comfortable, more at ease during this huge process that is surgery?
Well, um, obviously some of it's just really good TLC and care. I mean, and we are now working on trying to put together some special things for that. And I'll tell you one lesson I learned: it's not what you give. If it's thoughtful, it means, like, for example, you hear these, some people, the patient goes to the hotel room and they got a big bouquet of flowers. I mean, that's so cliched, right? But we're trying to put together just some destination, packages that look like, okay, maple syrup from the area. It's something, about the area and that kind of thing. I don't really know that there's anything. We try to, um, overstaff on the patient concierge side so that they have the time to spend with those people, whether it's accommodations. They have the time to stop down to the OR just before their case and say hello to them and check in the day before, and those kind of things. See them in the post-op period, versus be too busy for that. I don't know. I mean, I think really just trying to put just thoughtful, meaningful, thoughtful things that don't need to cost you a lot of money,
Yeah.
except maybe they cost you, your people time, but just making it a focus. And I think it does make that's one thing that does make it a little easier when you have, you're doing just cosmetic practice. You do have just an aesthetic practice. What we did about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe more, maybe 8 or 9 years ago now, we completely separated the insurance and cosmetic division. And we did that because it is very hard for your team to switch gears. And
For,
focus.
like, separate teams in your clinic that.
We do. Yeah, we have some people that are just on insurance. Other than the nurse, the nurses, or some of the nurses will go back and forth. But as far as the admit people and the folks who do the billing and take the phone calls, I'll give you a story. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we had a PCC, and this is what made me realize we have got to separate it. And sure enough, we separated it, and the cosmetic stuff grew. So that's the downside of having an insurance mix in your practice. I do think it's hard to do. We did it for years, having them use the same share, separate physical space, separate waiting rooms, everything now.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just, I had one of my team members who was upset over that. She said, I'm not going to treat people differently. I said, look, um, the the people who come here, are patients who come to the insurance. They get world class care here, surgical care, patient care, you name it. But when you go to the Ritz, you get a different level of service than when you go to the Super 8. I'm sorry, it's the way it is.
Mhm.
And if you have a problem with that, maybe you need to be in a different country. But the reality is, we can't afford, you know, we don't scrimp on is delivering to our patients. But is something more like, if it's an insurance patient with a question, are they more likely to go to a voicemail? Yeah, they are. If it's an inquiry and a facelift, man, they get, there. So you, and until we separated the way the patients were managed and where they were seen, it does undermine your cosmetic practice. There's no question. And I'm a realist. I'm not going to, make believe that it anyway. So I was starting to tell you, Jackie, who was our PCC, I remember this is like the day, it was like the epiphany. She said, "Oh, I just feel so bad. I spent an hour on the phone with this woman from Florida who wants to come for Dr. Polonese." Anyway, she was a woman, and she felt so bad. She's getting a runaround. It was insurance based breast reduction that he was never going to get. They were never going to get. Didn't have the sources to get on a plane, and so Jackie, because she's a very caring individual, it can't differentiate between a person in need, you
Yeah.
know, and that's why you have to separate them. I feel very strongly about that. if you're gonna, I know you don't do it, you don't have an insurance-based practice, but we've had the opportunity to get rid of it many times, and it's part of who we are at this point. And like I said, there are enough financial reasons to keep it too. Um, but I think that's been something that's helped us. So as far as and trying to, if patients are willing to come from a distance, I do think that they, deserve to get treated. You know, I mean, someone's going to get in an airplane and come see you or drive 3 or 4 hours. I think that's, they need to be able to feel that. So I think most of it, thoughtful things and making the time.
What makes a good fellowship director? You've hosted many fellows over the years, and if someone young, like my generation of surgeons, is looking into the future a few years, if any of us are interested in starting a fellowship program, what goals or who should we strive to be as a mentor to the younger generations, surgically, business wise, all of the things?
Look, I don't. We all have different. Not everyone has business acumen, right? So that's not a critical component of the fellowship, I don't believe. I think what is a critical component of the fellowship, though, and a very important part of it, is to be a good mentor. And to be a good mentor, you have to take a genuine interest. And I do. I mean, I take a genuine interest in our fellows' success. I want to see them successful. I get communication on a regular basis from them looking to leave, a situation, looking to put a building in. Um, but it's like having, I mean, it's no different than having children. You have to give them time. You know,
Mhm.
we're in a cosmetic fellowship. I mean, I can't let the fellows do a lot of the case. I did all that. I did it in the VA. I did it for years. All the skin cancer, the fellows do all the case. But if I'm doing, I mean, I remember probably 7, 8 years ago, maybe it was maybe 2, 3 years after I transitioned, and I really felt like I had deep plane down. I let the fellows raise the flaps, and I'd end up with buttonholes in the smash, and I'm like, I can't do that anymore. So I don't think letting the fellow do the surgery is the answer. And I got to tell you, I trained with Gene Tardy, and I learned an awful lot. If a fellows, if you, when I pick fellows, I want to make sure that they're good surgeons and they're well trained. I can't teach them how to do surgery in a year. To
Mhm.
me, about um, helping their development as a surgeon, helping their development as a human being. Tim Minton said to me, finished in 2010, he said, I did this because of, I knew your business acumen and whatever. I didn't know I was going to get a life coach. To me, that was a compliment because, but it's no different than having kids. If you don't take a genuine interest in them, you don't have a relationship with them, right? So I think that really taking an interest in their career, their development, their decisions, um, is important. It's very different than a residency because it is more
How many fellows have you had now?
24, 25, something like that. Yeah. Now we're doing two a year. So, we get a double, we get, two at once. But yeah. And I know them all. I know their families. I know their kids. Not well, no, but I know, the kids' names and you spend I would dare say some of my best friends are my former fellows now because you share a year together. And there's good times and there's bad times too. I can tell you stories. We've all been through bad shit, right? So it could be me at the time. um yeah, I've been through my share of stuff too. Had a house burned down with all the contents and the dogs, and that was a really that was a tough time. Um, I've had fellows who've had health problems, and so yeah, it's taking a genuine interest and I will tell you the wrong reason to do it honestly is for um just to think for the whatever you think, cachet, prestige, whatever you want to call it. I had one person who's a fellowship director call me once, like he was thinking about. He goes, I want to bring a fellow on. I just think I don't have to dictate any of the op reports. They're sucking fat. I can go have a cup of coffee. I'm like, that's not really why you take a fellow, So that's the wrong reason. But we all know who those people are. It's interesting too because I know some fellowship directors that I know a certain way, right? And then you hear from applicants, or you hear from fellows who you have that person's really a jerk. So you know
It's
there.
it's such an important role. And I feel like, thank you to you and all the teachers out there that are teaching the next generation of surgeons, because yeah, there's just so much that goes into teaching, and it really does slow you down, and it takes a huge part of your brain space throughout the day, I imagine. And it's you're leaving your legacy, which is
I,
really
get
incredible.
a lot, I get a lot out of it, and selfishly, it's like when your kids do well. There's a lot of satisfaction of that, and um, I didn't have, for fellowship director, I did not have a good mentors. I mean, Dr. Tardy was, so at the time he was younger than I am now, right? But I just think he was beyond it, and so he really couldn't be a mentor. And the younger fellowship director was so into his career that it wasn't didn't really take a personal interest in us at all. Um and I always, I remember thinking that I'll never be like that. I want to make sure that I'm a better person than that, and make so yeah, I do think and that's why I think I told you way back when I was talking to you, don't discount it. Don't discount, because I will tell you that I've had more satisfaction and get more gratification from um having a fellowship than pretty much anything else I've done. So my current fellow, Matt Urban, is going down. He's starting his own practice, and he was looking at a bunch of different opportunities, and basically I helped him. He identified a practice down there. I kind of gave him guidance. I really encouraged him to go in a certain direction. And I had I had a I flew us down there one day just to spend time and spend time with the guy who was looking to buy the practice with, and help with negotiations. He's never going to forget that.
Yeah.
Uh, and selfishly, I get a lot out of it too. I really do. I learn. I told him, I said, the reason I wanted to go down there and look this guy in the eye and talk to him is, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and I want to know, I want him to know how good you are, but I want to be able to listen to him and look him in the eye and get a feel. Is this guy somebody that you are willing to, because if I don't care how good the legal work and the paperwork is, if you don't have a good person on the other side. So
Mhm.
me just going down and spending a few hours with this guy was worth it. And so, but he'll never forget that, right? I think he's grateful. I mean, he's like, there's no way I would have the confidence to make that kind of offer or make an offer on it without, so yeah, that's, to me, and it's fun.
Well, rounding out our discussion, what do you see in your future? What does the next 5 to 10 years hold? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to?
Um, I'm going to continue, I'll tell you, I just turned 65. So it's a really weird thing. I'm not going to be one of these people doing surgery in my 70s. That I know. I don't need to do another facelift. I don't need to do another rhinoplasty. I don't want to see our revenue stream drop, with me walking away from it at this point. I have a lot to teach. I probably will do a little less at our national meetings, but I do want to continue to leverage my experience. Um, and I don't know if you knew this, but I have first of all, the growth in our industry is in the non-surgical. I know that, and the equity piece on the surgical practice isn't worth a lot. It
Yeah.
just is. I mean, we're a pain in the ass to deal with surgeons. We're too subject to the economy. It's not something you can scale up. But I have partnered from an equity point of view with Aesthetics, because to me, I'm not going to ignore this opportunity. The non-surgical space is going to continue to grow,
Mhm.
and so again, I'm just moving equity around into different places, but we're going to scale this up, economy of scale. I mean, I have been I've been in this industry for 33 years. We, you do things at a very high level, have worked so hard to do this the right way. And we have these non-surgical med spas popping up all over the place that, this has nothing to do with a degree, because I've seen some phenomenal PAs and MPs who've been at it for 15, 20 years. But whether it's an MD doc who's all of a sudden now is passionate about, aesthetics, passionate, like I'm not even passionate about facelifts as much as I love doing them. So we have got to come up with a high level standardization, high level training that is not just, based on the companies. I mean, the companies do a great job, but they have their agenda too.
They're very biased.
They're
Yes.
very, so what we're doing with Alpha is we're putting together Alpha Academy. We're going to get a couple of rock stars, high level people that are very objective, and put it, training protocols and elevate the field. I mean, when I see the stuff that people are doing out there, I mean, I won't do thread lifts. I don't know you. I don't want to get, but I'm going to tell you right now. I've been doing it I've been in this industry for a long time. I did them. Okay. I can't understand why they've made a way back, especially. It makes no sense to me at all. You got to cut, remove tissue, and elevate it. You can't just pull it and expect it to hold. We learned that with Gore-Tex slings 30 years ago. Like, why is that going to change now? So, and yet I got a med spa down the road who's got, an internist who's doing thread lifts in the nose. I mean, so I'm looking, this is what, now, okay, now you can tell, right? I start getting excited that I am passionate about keeping our industry at the highest level and on the non-surgical side as well, and scaling that up, because, the surgeons are going to stand to lose if we don't, because you're competing with all this noise out there.
Hmm. Yeah, I do think it's hard for patients who are not in the industry to
Hey,
decipher themselves.
they don't know. I will tell you though that I think quality always still wins. Quality will always win. But there are people popping up, doing things that I just can't believe they're doing.
Yeah.
And it does, by the way, they're passionate about it until they're not making enough money, and now they're doing the skinny shot. I mean, it blows my mind. So I'm working hard, and my loyalty is with facial plastic surgeons, obviously, but anyone who's doing it at a high level, to really keep our industry at the highest level possible. I've just seen and I think social media has made it worse, because now all of a sudden you got these, yeah, there are there are workshops how to become a key opinion leader. I mean, can you believe it? People are paying $5,000 to go learn how to, so how about just like teach honestly and publish papers and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's where I want to. My mark. My mark isn't to continue doing surgery into my 70s. There's a lot of younger people out there that can do a fine job. So I'm looking to, leave my legacy on our industry, yeah, and continue to help and mentor people. I mean, I find that part fun. So I know it was a long answer, but
I know it's a great answer, and something that I look forward to seeing you grow and learning kind of how you contribute to the industry.
yeah.
Um, well, thank you for your time today, Dr. Williams, again, and thank you on behalf of all the younger facial plastic surgeons out there who have learned a lot from you personally, you at meetings, you through books, and your own podcast, The White Coat Investor. If someone is wanting to reach out to you, is there a good way? What's your
Yeah.
website?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my personal email is just ewilliams@williamssurgery.com. But just going through the White Coat Investor, I think I think it's Dr. Edwin Williams. I don't even know, but there's an email link that you can email to. But I'm always, like I said, I'm always to me, I enjoy it, so I don't consider it a hassle. In fact, I find it, you know, refreshing. And I am very, as you know, I'm loyal to our specialty, and I think this is something we have to really take seriously. We talk about hustle like your boat, but we have to protect our specialty, and we need to get your generation really involved with the academy because, if the academy goes away, it's hard to believe that we could ever be in a position where we couldn't call ourselves what we call ourselves, but that could happen. It's just like a vote. All of a sudden, if the wrong place and people are in the wrong place. So it's hard now because we have so much momentum and we have high level quality, but it's easy for us to rest on our laurels, right?
Well, thank you again so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for the kind words, and I applaud you, Laura, for doing this. I really do. I think it's great. The sharing is terrific, and if you ever need anything from me, let me know. All right.